Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Today I just want to go through how I actually do these stones. So I said on the video that I just completed where we were testing out a few doping methods and comparing them, that I work on pieces like this off the channel all the time. So today we'll work on this one here because people have been wanting a demonstration of how to get a polish on something that's mostly ironstone rather than opal. Something like this is really easy. I've got 1,000 videos out there, well not quite. I've got a couple hundred videos out there that show you how you can get a nice polish on something that's mostly opal, but when it's mostly ironstone, people are very interested because it doesn't take the same type of polish as what an opal does, because the ironstone is like an iron oxide material, whereas the opal is hydrated silica. So I work on pieces like this all the time. I've even got a bag here that just says dop and polish, and I just dop and polish various stones that are just like this. So they're cut to a kind of like a pendant shape, and what I do is I want to bezel set these when I can get into bezel setting. So if there's any jewelers watching, I'd love feedback on whether what I'm doing will work for a bezel setting. I've talked to a few jewelers and they said yeah, it's fine, and that's why I do it the method that I do. But I'll just go through it and you guys can see, and there's heaps of people that make bezel set jewelry watching the channel, so I'm hoping to get some of their opinions as well. Now this one, I will mention there is a little trick to this one. So see how this opal seam comes down through the face? This can actually be a pretty weak point, and this can always break off. I don't think it's going to happen in this piece. It's not exaggerated enough for that to happen. But you can see it's just got a little bit of a thin seam of opal. If I just put some water on my finger, we'll get it to show up a bit better. A little bit of a Y-shaped kind of piece of opal in amongst an ironstone pendant. Now, I used to just drill holes, and then you can thread a leather cord or something through here or through the front and grip on it like this. But I do really want to get into bezel setting a lot of stuff. I think bezel setting is a more of a premium look, and it does seem, talking to a few people, that it is a really good way to just make back a little bit of coin that you've spent on some rough opal. A simple boulder pendant set in silver, bezel set, looks really good, and you only need to get a few $dozen out of it and you've paid off the rough, because you can get rough parcels like this for next to nothing, as long as you've got good sellers like Nick Hoops out there. So the method in general, no sintered diamond burr needed for this one because it's already pre-formed into its final shape. What we're going to do is this. I've got 60 grit Nova Point all the way through to 50,000. Now people say, I haven't tested it a lot yet, but people say that a 50,000 Nova Point, so this is 50,000 grit diamond, American grit standard. 50,000 grit is supposed to get a reasonable finish on the good old boulder opal ironstone kind of material. But just in case, I can always show off my aluminium oxide as well, which I know guarantees get a good finish. I can typically finish stones like this with aluminium oxide to get a nice mirrory finish, and I've got videos explaining why that is. Basically, the aluminium oxide is a much harder polishing compound than cerium oxide, so it's only a couple points below diamond here, and so it can get a nice finish even on a harder surface just because of its abrasive properties rather than chemical properties. But I'm wanting to try out the 50,000 grit more because, as you can see, the burr's not been used that much. I've just broken it in, basically, getting rid of the seams and everything, and it's pretty good, but I don't know how good it is compared to my polishing powder. So I really want to keep testing it, and I can always go back and use a polishing powder anyway. So let's get into it. And the carving begins. So for this one, all of the shaping, and I want to emphasize all of the shaping, is done with the 80 grit Nova Point. You can also do this with a 280 grit if you really want. I'm just using the 80 grit because I've got it. And it is a hell of a burr. Look how quickly the ironstone comes off. It cuts as fast as a sintered diamond almost. It's really fast. Make sure to keep the burr wet. Make sure to keep the stone wet. Not just because it could damage the burr, but because you can really bake in a lot of ironstone as it comes loose. This is a really porous stone. You'll see it in the final finish that it's unfortunately just got a lot of porosity in it. So if you just grind this ironstone in, you will bake it in. So what I was doing first was just straightening the edge, and now I'm just focusing on getting the nice face. Just making sure that the edges are going to be perfect for setting in a bezel setting. So just taking off a little bit just to give the metal something to hug onto. And then I'll show you the 3000 because this is the first of the polishing. And note the burr. it's actually taking off quite a bit. Normally we don't care so much by the time we get to 3000, but the ironstone will actually come off quite quickly, as you can see from the staining. It will be quite significant compared to a normal opal, so just be careful and just polish the face. Now, I wouldn't say I was a hater of the 50,000 point Nova or any of the higher grit Novas. I've always gone up to about 3000, then switched to metal polishing compound, like a cerium oxide paste or a aluminium oxide for boulder opal. But I've got to say, every time I use it, I am pleasantly surprised at how much of a gloss that 50,000 gets. It is actually getting it to a finished point. I still think aluminium oxide might be a tad better, but I really should consider stocking the 50,000 grit carving burrs in the store because they actually work quite well. For example, if you have a look at the side here, so the side we stopped doing after about 1,200-ish, you can see how it's got maybe semi-pre-polish at best. No matter what I do, I can't get it to shine. Whereas the front here, it's incredibly well polished. Unfortunately, on this stone, it's got a lot of porosity. So you can see that there's a lot of pits and stuff. Those you can't get rid of unless you seal up the entire thing, which would mean a treatment with a resin, which I typically don't do, especially on stones like this, where it's kind of like a pretty rough and rugged looking piece. I just want to make a pendant out of it, probably hang it in this direction with the skinnier point towards the top. And the more ironstone in the face, the more I try to keep a really natural shape and natural finish. So I really don't want to treat it. Even this shape alone, when I've got thin little seams of opal running through the face, I actually don't like how square this is. I think I might change it so that it's a little bit more asymmetrical, because it's a little bit too symmetrical. I like a really natural look, but for now we'll keep it like this. And in essence, I've just popped it off the dot. The final step, which I won't show because it's a little bit too boring, is just to measure with calipers from the top. And this stone, I think I'll make it about a 3mm. So I'll line it at 3mm and then I'll cut off the line. I do this because the ribbons, like the silver metal ribbon that I'll use to bezel set this kind of stuff, I can get it in various sizes, but if I cut it to 3mm and then take off the line, I should be able to get a 3mm to fit perfectly well. And then on top of that, I just get a sintered diamond burr and I cut this off at an angle. So if we look at it like this, I'll basically just take it off here just to get rid of that point so that it doesn't mess with sitting in the bezel. Because the soldering might be done on the inside edge, and then you might have a little bit of silver just kind of cutting off that corner, so you don't want it to contact the stone. And it does make it, apparently, bezel a lot better. So I just trim off that edge once I've got it down to the right thickness all the way around. So I'll just line it all the way around here, because at the moment it's pretty uneven still. And I just need to match it to the top face. That's typically how I go. And then the top edge, the little part that the metal's going to curl over, I just think of it as the metal just hugging the stone. You just need enough to hug evenly all the way around the edge. I try my hardest to avoid anything going in. So you can see on this edge here, I've made sure that if anything, it's slightly convex out in this direction. If you start going in, or there's little chips out of the side or something, then you're going to have a gap between that and the metal that runs along the side. And I've heard that it's much harder to get something to fit like a inwards curve, a concave edge, rather than a convex edge. So I try to keep them flat or slightly outer curve. Same with the points. You don't want the points too sharp. You want them nice and rounded, and that should give you the best chances of setting it. So if there's any jewelers watching, please let me know if there's any other points that I should really be considering, because I've done quite a few of these stones now. I know a few that I did earlier before I talked to silversmiths need a lot of tweaking, because I didn't focus a lot on the bottom edge or the setting edge along here. So some of them are a little bit misshapen and will be a real pain to get the metal to hug it properly. That's it. That's what I do with a lot of these little bits of boulder that come my way. And really, it costs very little. So when it comes to making this into a pendant and selling it, they typically sell quite easy because you can keep them at a very low price, and people just like the look of a nice earthy little pendant like this. I do like the leather string, but I do want to get into the silver setting. I think there's a little bit more demand for a silver bezel set boulder opal pendant rather than one where I just get a small burr, drill a hole through here sideways, or On this stone, I'd probably flip it over this way and drill a little hole through here, and then string it, and you're good to go. But I do like them. I just don't think they're as popular. So I want to get into silversmithing anyway, and this would be a great stone to do it with. Who knows, it was meant to be this year, but maybe next year. We'll try again. But before I can think about that, it's time to move on to the next video, so I'll see you guys later.